I believe I was the only Democrat that was fully supportive about striking the Iranian nuclear facilities. I was the one person that really celebrated this peace deal. Towards the end of the Gaza War, 8% of Democrats supported the military of the Gaza War. I'm part of that 8%. I'm proudly part of that 8%. They were fighting for civilization in a very, very core way. How could you not vote and support all of those things?
And we're back for another episode of Standpoint. I'm Gabe Groisman. We're sitting here in Washington, D.C. in the United States Senate studios. I started this podcast about 2 years ago, meeting with elected officials, members of Congress, senators, heads of state, actually, as well. And you notice in this space, when you get to sit down with people in office, that many times they're just giving you talking points. You're not actually speaking to a person sometimes. It takes a while to get to what someone actually thinks. The person that I'm interviewing today, I'm so honored to interview him, Senator John Fetterman, is someone who is the polar opposite of that. You know what he thinks because he lets you know what he thinks. He doesn't fit into a specific box. People have been following him. I've been trying to get this interview for a while. I've had the honor to meet the senator a few times. We'll talk about it. And I want to be respectful of the senator's time, and we're going to jump right in. So this is Standpoint. I'm Gabe Groisman. Let's get started. Senator Fetterman, thank you so much.
Oh, it's an honor to be here. Thank you for allowing me to participate in this conversation.
Thank you. I'll start on a light note. I mean, it's all kind of light, but I was talking to Tila before, and she said, you should have worn a hoodie. It's the only way he'll feel more comfortable. I'm a hoodie guy too, but I still put on the uniform. So, sorry I couldn't do that.
Well, you look the way a senator should, I guess. And I wish I was able to pull that off, but I am where I'm at. But parts of this conversation, I would identify that as one of the supreme of my honor in my career in the Senate is standing with Israel and the Jewish community, both domestically here, but all international as well too. And that's part of an ongoing conversation during probably the most dramatic and political division in our nation right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's jump right into that. We met, actually, the first time we met, I brought with some friends that are here actually in the studio. I brought a group of kids who became orphans during the war after October 7th to the Senate, to the House, met with members, and met with many senators. When we walked into your office, it was an entirely different experience. First, obviously, they see you, big guy in a hoodie, and I don't know what they knew or didn't know before the meeting. And when they went around the room and started sharing their thoughts with you, Senator, you became emotional and really just opened up on a very personal level. Tell us about that visit and a little bit more broadly, how you got into this. You became really an icon in the pro-Israel community since October 7th.
Yeah, well, what you just referenced, it was a very profound experience for me because you had to meet like young heroes that lived through the history of the 10/7, and one of the young men was the same age as mine, and that was the same day I found out that my son just got his driver's permit, and I was just talking to a young man, lost his father, and was murdered by Hamas, and had to witness that, and to how it just breaks my heart. And I can't imagine someone at such a young age had to live through that. And after losing your father is devastating for anybody, but especially in those kinds of awful, violent way, and how he's able to carry on and carry himself with such strength and dignity blew my mind. And they left with some materials there, and I've got that framed. And I just referenced that. That is prominently in my office, just to the Speaker of the Israeli Essential House. And it's like, this is why I'm here, to stand with the community and how profound, and the world might deny or just not talk about the kinds of things. So it's a testament, and it's been a supreme honor for me to meet young people through that. Those are the true heroes, and that's real courage.
Senator, if you walk through the halls of Congress, not now, as most of the hostages, all but one, have been released, People would have seen posters everywhere, none more than around your office. But I actually brought the first group of survivors back in October 2023 to Congress. And one of the meetings we had was with you when there were no posters on the wall anywhere. It's actually the first time they brought posters. And I don't know if you recall this, but you told your staff to take out Scotch tape and you wanted to put it outside on your door.
Yeah.
One of the first to do this. Why was it so important for you to make a statement as one of the first to really start putting up hostage posters, to make a public statement to your colleagues? Why was it important for you to do that?
Yeah, well, that was a reverse. That was a father, and his son was a soldier that was taken in that. And how profound! How, like, I can't imagine it as a father. I couldn't function. But now here he was in Washington D.C., reminding people what happened and where he is. And I took his poster and I said, may I put this up in my office? And then I put it up outside my office, and then I was pushed to take them down. So we just put all of them up immediately in my front office, in my office here in DC, to remind people that these are real people and real lives that are being held against their will underground in horrible circumstances. And now they tragically lived on my walls in my office for 2 years. 2 years, because real human people were kept underground for that thing. And now there remains one person. One person still hasn't brought home. And that's a testament of what happened on 10/7 and why it's entirely appropriate. Because if you're tired of seeing these things, it's like, well, remember, people are still there. And that's part of that terrible Gaza war. So that was a simple decision. And that's also, it's folks and interactions like that changed my life and my worldview. And that's why it still manifests itself in my office to this day.
Pretty incredible. And the soldier whose body is still being held is Rangvili. Did I get that right, Tila? Yeah, Rangvili. His body's still there. We come close with his father over the years. I was actually walking on the streets of Tel Aviv with some governors, chiefs of staff a month ago, and he was there. He stopped me in the middle of the street to continue to make the case to make his son not be forgotten, so he can be brought home as well. Tell me a little bit more, if you would, about how your involvement with the Jewish community and with Israel changed your worldview, as you mentioned.
Oh, I mean, as a student of history, I've been always aware of the awful history and also the triumph of Israel. And then for me, on a very more personal level, I'm not a member of the community, so I can't speak to that experience. But when it really touched my life in the first way was the Tree of Life massacre. I was running for lieutenant governor, and I was in Philadelphia at the time. And a friend who lived right across the street called and said that they're killing Jewish members of the synagogue. And I'm like, oh my God. So I got off the phone and I decided immediately I'm going to drive back to Squirrel Hill for the vigil, and that someone came into a synagogue and executed elderly people, innocent people. It's like how violent and just, I can't imagine if you're in your house of worship and someone barged in and just started executing people. And that reminded people just how raw and real anti-Semitism is. And I had no idea. I don't think anyone did. The horrors of 10/7 was coming, but that introduced me to the real world thing that brought home 3-4 miles away from where I live.
Yeah, and another big incident, obviously in Pennsylvania, was last year during Passover, when someone tried to burn down the governor's home. Actually,
Yeah.
burned down a big portion of it. Tell me about how the rise of anti-Semitism, how you've seen it from your place here as a U.S. Senator.
Absolutely. It's devastating. And thank God. He has a beautiful family and they were all safe from after that. But it's another reminder, that the way anti-Semitism has manifested itself in parts of my party, heartbreaking. and why I can't. I mean, like, I immediately after 10/7, I'm like, hey, I'm going to be a committed voice for Israel and the Jewish community. And I said I'm willing to be the last man standing within my caucus here, that it's like I'm going to follow the moral clarity after 10/7, and whatever Israel needs, financial, military, or intelligence, whatever, I'm going to vote for that. I'm going to support it. And for me, um, that has become, the honor to be a senator here, to stand after that existential war after 10/7.
Were you surprised by the pushback that you got from your party?
No, no, I'm not surprised. I mean, perhaps if there's a surprise, maybe the intensity of it, but just how I've also witnessed how it took over, many college and universities campuses. Crazy things. It's not free speech to create like this tent city and to scream and intimidate students and create these circumstances that made you can't even feel safe. Just yesterday, when I came back from New York after meeting with the president of Israel just the night before, and there's an ad hoc tent city at Union Station, and a bunch of them emerged and with a bullhorn and started screaming at me, and I was just walking to my office here at Russell, screaming those things. And that didn't bother me, but I can't imagine if I had to go to school with these people, how unsafe and how disturbing it must be to be a member of the Jewish community. And now the poll, about 40% of Jewish students actually hid their Jewish identity. It's outrageous, outrageous. And so again, that's why I can't speak to that experience. But what I can do is probably stand with that community in whatever way.
One thing that's really been noticeable, Senator, is your outreach to the community that you mentioned. From where I stand, I'm watching it on social media, on traditional media, and I see it seems like you're being really welcomed in a very warm manner from the communities. By the way, not just Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, but also in the ultra-Orthodox communities in New York, anywhere you're going. Can you tell us a little bit about how your relationship has become with how it's developed with the Jewish community over the last 2 years?
Oh, I mean, I've been welcomed, and whether when I would walk around in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv, or whether wherever I go, people stop, and they thank me, and I'm like, please don't thank me. I mean, that should have come with a deal. Here as a U.S. senator, to stand with our key ally in Israel after that. Um, and people respond and use terms of that's courage. And then I said, no, this war has redefined my opinion and my view on what courage is. And that's like that young person that we started this interview, or the soldiers. And in Israel, I met widows. Coincidentally, they both lost eight. They have 8 kids, and they have to raise 8 kids. And they lost their husband in the Gaza wars. That's courage. And I had the honor of being and meeting soldiers that were in the middle of it, or they were choppering in injured soldiers or bringing them out. That's courage. Here in the Senate, that's not courage, but I think that's a moral conviction, and that's what I've proudly maintained through the entire Gaza war.
I can tell you, I know the stories of the widows you met with, and I've met with those widows as well. I've gone to one of their homes with my wife, met their children, and they talk about your visit often because of your directness with them and your warmth. I think it surprised them, sort of how I started, where usually with senators or members of Congress or elected officials in general, you get a lot of there's lots of layers, let's say, to be kind, until you get to who the person really is. With you, you just are who you are, which I think is much appreciated for so many people. I wanted to shift, Senator. You were a mayor for 13 years. I was a mayor for 6 years. I don't know how you lasted that long. Both small towns. Yours was a working class town in Pennsylvania. Mine was a nice, an affluent town in Florida. But you know that being a mayor is being a mayor. And when you're looking at what's happening in cities across America, having been a mayor, you look at it in a different way, right? Because you understand the levers that mayors can pull, the impact they can have on people's lives. We're seeing huge changes in America's cities. with the far left taking over in some cities. Of course, Mamdani is front and center in that discussion. What's your perspective from your background as a mayor and someone that's in the Democratic Party here in the Senate pushing back on some of these very issues? What's your perspective on what's happening in America's cities and what we could do to change it?
It's heartbreaking where you have someone that's just, they are proud or avowed socialist. You know, I've met and talked to people that grew up and lived under actual real socialism, and uniformly they reject it and they say it's been a nightmare. And now I'm able to sit at a beautiful restaurant and I can have a job and I can have, parts of living in a free society. And now whether it's in New York or whether it's in Seattle, and now that's thing. And what's also defining the people that are running in the Senate, some of these campaigns are really organized to be very anti-Israel, and now making these kinds of statements, and that it's heartbreaking, and now that's part of what's happened, and the rise of anti-Semitism. As a mayor, I didn't face those kinds of issues as a mayor, but now where we have now, that's part of, I'm appalled of where things are at, and I'm going to follow my vote, and my voice is with that moral clarity through it. So, yeah, I mean, I had a chance to, I received a presidential medal from Yeshiva University. And I said, oh my God, I mean, that's an amazing honor, but I don't deserve that, because the prior honoree was the man that helped develop the Iron Dome. That's and I'm like, I don't belong in the same category of this. Like, hey, I'm just a senator with a vote and a voice. But that was a supreme honor. But I had the chance to spend an evening with him just a couple nights ago, and I was so warmly embraced by the entire room. That was their Hanukkah annual, the 110th year. Surprise. It's like I'm constantly embraced by that. And I never thought that my vote or voice would matter, but it did. And every time someone stops me to say that, it just affirms why I'm deeply proud to have remained firmly on that side.
Incredible. I could tell you it is appreciated, absolutely, and your voice does matter. That's, I think, the key role of a senator today when it comes to anti-Semitism and the Jewish community is to be a strong voice. From where I sit, though, it seems like you're alone in your work within your party here at the Senate. Do you find that there is a growing coalition around you, or are you actually a lone soldier out there in this fight?
Yeah, I mean, it's been isolating. I believe I was the only Democrat that was fully supportive about the striking the Iranian nuclear facilities. And I was the one person that really celebrated this peace deal. Like, absolutely. The Trump administration was very instrumental about creating peace. And it's like, I don't care if it's a Republican or Democrat. It's like, that was an amazing development. And that helped bring all the well, not all of them, but almost all of the hostages now too. And I've met these hostages just a couple weeks ago. They've been underground for more than 2 years. 2 years. They're able to function and have normal conversations in such ways. And so, like, being isolated here, and that's easy compared to the trauma that they really face for that. And now, as things get more and more talk about unpopular, towards the end of the Gaza War, 8% of Democrats supported the military of the Gaza War. And I'm part of that 8%. I'm proudly part of that 8%. That had to be carried to the end till everyone was brought home. And now, after destroying Hezbollah and Hamas and Iran, now you have an opportunity to have real peace forward now. And now Iran can't even keep water in their taps for their people. But they had billions to try to build those proxies trying to destroy Israel. and Israel prevailed. The IDF, it's remarkable what they've done, and how you as a Democrat can't vote for anything what they need to do those things. Like that, they were fighting for civilization in a very, very core way. How could you not vote and support all of those things? Yes, there was um, mass kinds of trauma for Palestinians, but that's the way Hamas designed that. Neither either Israel or Norley I have ever called Palestinians as a necessary sacrifice. They did. They believed that Palestinians dying, that was a necessary sacrifice for that. The moral clarity has always been there, and for me, that's never diminished. If anything, that's strengthened from the beginning to the end.
Absolutely. Earlier in your political career, you focused a lot on, you probably still do, on the working class and trying to raise up that the industrial class around the United States and Pennsylvania in particular. When I read about you, read that much is written about the fact that after your graduate studies, you went back to work in a blue collar town and to work to raise up your community. Tell me today, the industrial class in our country is hurting. Is the Democratic Party still talking to that working class, or has that been lost due to the political shifts of the party?
No, absolutely. I witnessed that about 10 years ago. Actually, in a way, both myself and Trump came up at the same time. My first statewide campaign occurred when he first ran for president, and I start to witness that he's making a connection with working class people. I was doing an event with the steel union, the steel membership, and I asked the president, like, hey, who's going with Trump or Clinton at the time? He's like, oh yeah, probably two-thirds, maybe more. I'm like, well, then we're really in trouble there for that. And that demonstrates to me, and that was in June of 2016, that those voters left our party, and they've identified that they've migrated to the Republican Party, perhaps. And some people in my party criticized them, saying, don't you get it? Are you dumb, or you're voting against your own personal kinds of interests? And I'm like, no, that means they might have different values and things. And that also in part explains why he won in 2024 now too. We have lost a block of those kinds of voters, and I've witnessed, and I live across the street, just like the steel mill. That was part of the fight to protect the workers' way of life in the Mon Valley. So, you mentioned my education. I went to Harvard, and now part of the yeshiva university, I took off my hood, and I'm saying, like, at that time, Harvard has turned their back on the Jewish community after that, and that's part of where I supported as well. When the Trump administration targeted campuses like Columbia or Harvard and called them accountable, how they allowed anti-Semitism to break all across the campus and terrorize Jewish students. So that's put me and isolated me as part of it, where I'm trying to explain why 2024 was almost inevitable, that we never really were able to win based on some of the conditions, including that you can't pander to the parts of the base, like in Michigan, for example, that it's like you have to stand with Israel through this. And now we tried to pander, and Trump won Michigan and actually carried places like Dearborn.
Yeah, big surprise for most people, right? By the way, I didn't mention Harvard. I think you graduated from the Kennedy School, right? I didn't mention it. These days, people, they're not so proud always of their Harvard degrees, but when you were there, it was definitely a different school. Obviously, the results speak for themselves. Senator, I wanted to ask you maybe one last question. There, in the public we live, I feel like there's two worlds. There's the social media world, right? The social media reality, and then reality itself. I think in Washington, we kind of have that as well. What happens in the halls of Congress, things that are spoken about here, sometimes there's a big disconnect between that and what happens in the conversations across America, right, in cafes and diners across America, living rooms. You've had a lot of pushback here in Washington in your party on your stance with Israel and the Jewish community. How has that differed from how, if at all, from how you've been received back home in Pennsylvania?
Very little in person. I mean, at times I've had protesters show up at my home, or I'll have protesters scream "Genocide John" or whatever, but overwhelmingly people stops me to appreciate these things, being willing, be independent thinking, common sense, and being they're like, "Hey, I'm proud of you the way you stood with Israel for that." But in a small way, it breaks my heart that members of the Jewish community, have been so in siege that they have, they're so grateful. And I'm like, there should have been much more examples of people standing with that. That's heartbreaking. But I'm so proud to be a small part of being the consistent moral clarity, and reminding Americans that there's really one side, and you can acknowledge the Palestinian suffering, but you can also remember and acknowledge, if you are heartbroken after this, some people and many Democrats blame that Israel for that. I blame Iran, and I blame Hamas, and I blame those people. We can both look at the tragedy in Gaza. I refuse to blame anyone other than Iran and Hamas. And now increasingly more and more Democrats are blaming Israel for that. And I strongly, in the strongest term, reject that.
Senator John Fetterman, thank you. Thank you for your moral clarity. It's much needed. As a proud American Jew, I can tell you that we do feel under siege. We are a strong community, a proud community. But the reality is many institutions in our country, political and otherwise, have turned their backs on the American Jewish community. I suffer from being an optimist. And sitting with you helps feed my optimism. So thank you for everything you've done. I'll do what other people have done that have stopped you on the street. I'll stop here to say thank you for your moral clarity. I'm sure there's much on politics we don't agree on or we do agree on. It's irrelevant because you speak with moral clarity and you have not abandoned common sense. So thank you so much, and thanks for your time.
Well, thank you for that. And I'll say this again. I am grateful for your kind words, but I'll say that you and the community deserve better, honestly. And unfortunately, that really that breakdown came from my party. It's been a small price for me, but again, I can't imagine how traumatic and difficult it's been for your community. I'm sorry, honestly. And now how things continue, this vote and voice is going to remain unchanged. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much. The Jewish people have defeated all of our enemies over the last 3,000 years. This time won't be any different, but we really appreciate you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I know everybody is excited about this episode. I hope it lived up to expectations. I know it did. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe, and do all the great things you do to support podcasts, and we'll see you next time. Senator Fetterman, thank you.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me here, really.
It was great.